I saw Sharon laughing too loud with another man at the diner, his hand resting on her arm. My coffee grew cold as she leaned into him, ignoring my table by the window. The waitress brought my check, her eyes pitying me. Sharon glanced over then, her smile fading only slightly as she pulled away, mouthing, "Later, honey," with a dismissive wave. The afternoon sun slanted hard through the kitchen window, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. Sharon was at the counter, sorting through a pile of mail, her usual pre-dinner routine. Her purse was still slung over a chair back from earlier, an unusual oversight. I watched her from the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Sharon," I said, my voice flat, holding no inflection. "I won't be here when you get back tonight." She paused, a bill held halfway to the recycling bin, her head tilted slightly. "What are you talking about, Dale? What's going on?" She turned, a faint frown knitting her brow, a familiar gesture that usually signaled mild annoyance, not genuine concern. "Where else would you be?" "Elsewhere," I replied, my gaze fixed on a small chip in the countertop near her elbow. The word hung in the air, a small, solid thing. She shifted her weight, a seoi escaping her lips. "Don't be childish," she said, a hint of her usual dismissiveness in her tone. She brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "You're just upset about something, aren't you?" "No," I corrected, pushing off the door frame, taking a step into the room. "I'm not upset, and I'm not childish. You're the one who has changed, Sharon. Not for the better." My eyes met hers. It's become very unattractive." The words felt heavy as they left my mouth, but they were true. A tiny muscle twitched in her jaw. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "I'm the same person I've always been." She picked up a magazine, fiddling with its corner. "Nothing has changed with me." "Then what was his name?" I asked, my voice still even, cutting through her defensiveness. "The man you had dinner with last week, the one you refused to name, the friend you spent 3 hours with." She flinched, the magazine crinkling in her hand. "That was nothing," she insisted, her gaze dropping to the glossy pages. "Just a business acquaintance. You know how these things are, and I love you, Dale, you know that, more than anything." Her eyes lifted again, wide and earnest, but they didn't quite meet mine. It was a practiced look. "My love for you," I began, choosing my words carefully, "has steadily diminished since you got home from that trip. It started as indifference, and now I think it's bordering on disgust." Each word was a brick, laid one after another. She stood still, her breath catching. Her features twisted then, a mix of offense and genuine disappointment, as if I had somehow failed to follow a script. It was a look I'd seen before, usually after I'd missed a crucial putt on the 18th hole, ruining a good round. She always wanted things to go smoothly, to be uncomplicated. This wasn't smooth. This was gravel. "You're being cruel," she said, her voice thin, wounded. "You need to take me seriously, Dale. I'm a business owner, for heaven's sake. Educated, independent. I deserve to be treated with respect." She straightened her shoulders, trying to project an image of strength. I looked at her, truly looked at her. "I do take you seriously, Sharon," I conceded, a flicker of something in my chest, a cold recognition. "That's the problem, Sharon. I realized you're not a very serious person." The air in the kitchen felt suddenly colder. Her shoulders slumped, her defiance fading. "Nothing is going to change between us," she said, her voice softer, almost pleading. "I'm going to make you insanely happy, Dale. You'll see. We'll be fine." She took a step towards me, her hand reaching out. "Everything will change," I stated, not moving, not letting her touch me. My words were final, like the last tick of a clock. In fact, things have already changed. I looked away from her, towards the back door. "What do you think Grace and Martha will think about their parents getting divorced?" Her hand dropped. She gasped, a sharp, choked sound. "What the hell, Dale? We're not getting a divorce." Her voice rose, indignant. "This is between you and me. It's none of their business." "No," I corrected her, my gaze returning to her face, hard and unwavering. "This isn't just about what's going on between us anymore. This is about what's going on between you and some unnamed dude." Sharon's face went from pale to flushed, her hands clenching into fists on the countertop. "You're going to complicate things, Dale." she accused, her voice rising in pitch. You always do this. Why can't we just set this aside for now and talk about it later? When we're both calm, she gestured around the kitchen as if to emphasize the inappropriate timing. The everyday setting suddenly charged. No, we won't, I said, my voice steady, almost detached. I'm leaving. I could feel the finality in my own words, a solid weight dropping into place. There was no turning back from this. Stay, she pleaded, taking a hesitant step towards me, her eyes wide. This is more important than anything you have planned right now, Dale. Whatever it is. She sounded desperate, but the desperation felt hollow, like a performance. I paused, looking past her, out the window at the neighbor's neatly mowed lawn. I didn't plan it, I admitted, the truth settling on me as much as on her. It just came out on its own. I just decided that a minute ago. The decision had solidified like concrete, hardening in the instant I spoke it aloud. It wasn't a calculated move, it was a realization. Her mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, she seemed to search for words, her usual quick wit failing her. But Dale, you can't just... You're too late, I cut her off, my gaze returning to her. The moment you lost respect for me as a man, as your husband, it was over. The words were simple, factual, without malice. They were just the truth, finally articulated. None of this is true, she practically shouted, her voice cracking. I never lost respect for you. How could you even say that? She took another step, her hands reaching out, but I held my ground. I don't believe you, I stated, the words unvarnished. Your actions, Sharon, they've spoken louder than anything you could ever say. They've unequivocally proven my assessment true. I watched her face, the way her denial warred with a dawning understanding. It was a slow dawning, but it was there. I took a step back, breaking the invisible line between us. My eyes scanned the small table by the door, where my essentials usually sat. My jacket, my wallet, my keys. I gathered them with deliberate, quiet movements. The rustle of the fabric, the jingle of the keys, the only sounds in the suddenly silent kitchen. My phone, already in my pocket. Sharon let out a small cry, a sound like a wounded animal. She made a desperate dash for the door, her heels clattering on the tiled floor. But I was already there, my hand on the doorknob. I was quicker, always had been. The moment I had picked up my keys, I had committed. I slipped out, closing the door firmly behind me, the latch clicking with a sharp final sound. Her voice, muffled, reached me from inside, but I couldn't make out the words. I walked quickly to my car, a sensible sedan, well-maintained. The engine turned over on the first try, a familiar hum. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw her through the rearview mirror, standing on the porch, a small, solitary figure in the fading afternoon light. Too late. The drive was quiet. The sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows across the Midwestern fields. I drove for a few minutes, the suburban streets giving way to a slightly older neighborhood with mature trees. I knew where I was going. Grace lived only a short 20-minute drive away. I pulled out my phone, the screen lighting up the car's interior. My thumb hovered over Grace's contact. Netflix and chill? I typed, a small, wry smile touching my lips. It was an old joke between us, a code for dad needs a quiet evening and some company. Almost immediately, her response came through. Would you like some company? A heart emoji followed, bright red against the white text. A moment later, another message. I'll make popcorn. That was Grace, always thinking of the details. I knew I would be welcome. The moment I stepped onto Grace's porch, the door swung open and I was nearly bowled over. Gus, her 160-pound Bordeaux, a massive, wrinkled dog, launched himself at me with a joyous grunt. He wriggled, a blur of affection and drool, nearly knocking my glasses off. I braced myself, laughing a little despite the weight of the day. Hey, big guy, I managed, patting his enormous head, feeling the warmth of his fur. Grace, standing behind him, pulled him back with a firm but gentle hand. Down, Gus, she commanded, a smile on her face. Her eyes, however, held a question. By the time I settled onto her worn leather couch, the one with the permanent Gus-sized indentation, Grace had already placed a glass of Merlot in my hand. A bowl of freshly popped popcorn, still warm, sat on the coffee table. She knew me well. She knew a dry red was what I preferred, even though she favored something sweeter herself. Not a word, she instructed softly, her hand still resting on Gus's head, keeping him from climbing onto my lap. She knew my aversion to sweet wines, but in her house, it was always Merlot. I know you hate my choice, but it's what I have. There was a gentle teasing in her voice, a familiar comfort. She came closer, a small square of plaid fabric draped over her arm. Her fingers, deft and quick, picked a piece of lint from my dark trousers. She spread the plaid blanket over my lap, tucking it around my legs. Gus settled with a heavy sigh at my feet, a warm weight. Then Grace snuggled into the cushion beside me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. It was a ritual, a small, unspoken comfort we shared, especially after a long day. The familiar scent of her shampoo, something light and floral, filled my senses. The comfortable silence stretched for a moment, punctuated only by the soft click of Gus's claws on the hardwood floor as he shifted. Then her voice, soft and innocent, pierced the quiet. "So," she began, her cheek still pressed against my shoulder. "What's Mommy doing?" I felt a familiar tension tighten in my chest. I stared at the popcorn, at the individual kernels, perfectly popped. "I'm not sure," I admitted, the words feeling inadequate. Grace shifted, pulling her head up slightly, her eyes searching mine. "What do you mean you're not sure?" There was a slight edge of worry in her voice now. I took a slow breath. This was it. No easy way around it. "She said she was going on a date," I explained carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral. "And when I told her I didn't agree with that, I left." The words felt stark, stripped bare, like bones. Grace stared at me, her mouth slowly falling open. The light from the lamp caught the surprise in her eyes. "What the hell, Daddy?" she demanded, her voice sharp with disbelief. "What the hell do you mean by date?" She pulled away from me, sitting upright now, her earlier softness gone. "A date," I repeated, confirming the worst. "With a man." She seemed to expect that I would just be fine with it, that it was normal. The truth tasted like ash. Grace shook her head, running a hand through her hair. "Is this a joke?" she asked, her voice laced with a raw anger. "What the hell is going on in there at home?" She looked around her living room, as if comparing it to the scene she was imagining back at our house. "I saw both of you on Wednesday," she continued, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Everything seemed fine. You were both laughing, you were planning something for the weekend." "I knew nothing until tonight," I clarified, my voice quiet. "Nothing at all." The deception felt heavy, a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying until now. Grace sprang up from the couch, grabbing her phone from the coffee table, her movements quick and decisive. "I'll call her," she declared, her eyes burning with a fierce, protective anger. "She needs to explain this." Grace's fingers moved with a practiced speed over her phone screen. She found Sharon's name, then paused, her thumb hovering over the call button. Her eyes met mine, a silent question passing between us, a shared breath held in the small space. Then, with a decisive press, she initiated the call. A moment later, she tapped the speaker icon, the phone's small voice now filling the room. The ringing, a distant, chirpy tune sounded painfully loud in the quiet house. It rang 3 times before Sharon's voice, bright and a little breathless, came through. "Hello, Grace? Everything okay?" There was an underlying note of caution, a slight tremor in the usually confident tone. Grace's voice when she spoke was sharp, devoid of any pleasantries. "Where are you, Mom?" she demanded, her gaze fixed on the phone. "And who are you with?" Her tone brooked no evasion. A beat of silence from the speaker. Then Sharon's voice, a little less certain. I'm just out with a girlfriend, honey, at the restaurant. You know, Marianne. We're just grabbing a bite." The lie was obvious, even over the phone line. It hung in the air, a flimsy, transparent thing. Grace's face hardened, her jaw clenching. Her eyes flashed, not at the phone but at me, as if to confirm what she was hearing. "What the hell, Mom?" she said, her voice rising, cracking with a raw fury. "You just lied to me. Dad's sitting right here." She pointed at me, her finger trembling slightly. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute, a sudden gaping void where Sharon's voice had been. It lasted for what felt like a long time. Then a faint gasp, a rustle of movement, as if Sharon was suddenly flustered, caught off guard. Grace didn't wait for a response. Her voice, though still loud, took on a chilling calm, laced with disbelief. "No, you just lied to me. My mother just lied to me." The repetition wasn't for emphasis. It was as if she needed to say the words aloud to fully comprehend them, to process the magnitude of the betrayal. Her own mother had just deliberately misled her. "I don't care where you are," Grace continued, her voice gaining strength, but tinged with deep hurt. "I don't care who you're with. You lied. I don't know how you're going to make it up to me." Her words were a door slamming shut. Then the final crushing blow. "Don't mess with my head," Grace commanded, her voice suddenly small, trembling. "Don't call me. Don't come here." And with a swift, decisive movement, she pressed the end call button. The click was sharp, definitive. The chirping dial tone ceased. The silence that followed was dense, suffocating, filling the room with the unspoken weight of what had just transpired. Grace stood there for a moment, rigid, her shoulders hunched. A faint tremor began to run through her. I reached out, pulling her close, my arms wrapping around her. She felt small and fragile in my embrace. Her body began to shiver uncontrollably, the tremors shaking her from head to toe. She buried her face in my chest, and the moans, which she had held back with such ferocity, finally broke free. They were deep, racking sobs, tearing through her small frame, shaking both of us. The sounds were guttural, heartbroken. I held her tighter, stroking her hair, the familiar scent of her shampoo now mixed with the salty smell of tears. "She lied to me, Dad," Grace choked out between gasps, her voice muffled against my shirt. "She told me she was with you at the restaurant. She said you were having dinner together." The words hit me like a physical blow. Sharon had not only gone on the date, not only lied to me, but she had used me as a cover, lying to our daughter about my whereabouts, about our supposed togetherness. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. My own eyes burned, the familiar sting of unshed tears threatening to spill. I held Grace closer, feeling the tremor of her grief, a mirror to my own quiet despair. "It's going to be okay," I murmured, the automatic words of comfort feeling hollow, inadequate. I knew in that moment that nothing about this was going to be okay for a long, long time. Grace pulled away from my embrace, her body still trembling slightly, but her face now set with a different emotion. The sad, heartbroken tears in her eyes dried, replaced by a fierce, raw anger. She sat up, rigid, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. "Daddy," she demanded, her voice tight, "what are you going to do to her?" The question was direct, unyielding, seeking an immediate solution, a path forward that I simply didn't have. I looked at her, at my daughter, who was usually so self-possessed, so certain. Her eyes, usually so clear, were red-rimmed and swollen. The weight of her expectation, combined with my own profound disorientation, pressed down on me. "I have no idea," I admitted, the words barely a whisper. My throat felt thick, constricted. "I'm floundering here, Grace. Completely." It was a confession, an admission of a vulnerability I rarely, if ever, showed. I was lost, adrift without a compass, and she was looking to me for answers I didn't possess. "I came here," I continued, feeling the need to explain my presence. "Just to chat with you, to try to get my thoughts in order. You always had a clear head." I needed her logic, her grounded perspective, even if I couldn't articulate my need directly. I just wanted someone to talk to, someone who understood, even partially, the seismic shift that had just occurred. Grace looked down at her hands, still clenched. A moment passed, the quiet broken only by Gus's soft breathing. Then she looked up, her expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with a fresh wave of sadness. "I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. It's not your fault I asked you." Her understanding was a small comfort, a quiet recognition of my own pain. She pushed herself off the couch, walking over to a small side table where a ball of tissues sat. Shawsh. She pulled out a handful, deliberately wiping her eyes, then blowing her nose with a loud, resolute sound. It was an effort to regain control, a visible act of pulling herself back from the edge. After she had composed herself, she sank to the floor, right beside Gus. The massive dog grumbled, a low rumbling sound in his chest, clearly annoyed at having his nap disturbed. But Grace ignored him, simply lowering herself onto his enormous body, burrowing her face into his fur. His tail thumped once, a slow, heavy thud against the hardwood. She wrapped her arms around his thick neck. "Cuddling Gus always calms me down," she explained, her voice muffled against his flank, a slight tremor still audible. She stroked his coarse fur, the rhythmic motion a silent reassurance. He was an anchor, a solid, uncomplicated presence. I watched her, a pang of tenderness in my chest. "Hugging you always calms me down," I said softly, a small, wry smile touching my lips. "And you smell better than Gus." I needed to lighten the mood, if only for a moment. This kind of heavy silence, this crushing weight of betrayal was too much for us both. A weak giggle escaped Grace, a fragile sound that broke the tension. "He is a little stinky sometimes," she conceded, lifting her head slightly to look at me, a faint, watery smile on her face. The moment of shared, dark humor was fleeting, but it was there. The questions, however, still lingered. She sat up fully, leaning against Gus now, her gaze fixed on mine again, serious once more. "But Daddy," she began, the weight of her earlier questions returning, "where did this come from? What's going on? And what are you going to do?" Her voice held a quiet desperation for understanding, for a path, any path. I shook my head, my shoulders slumping slightly. The truth was still as elusive as ever. "I don't know," I repeated, the three words a mantra of my confusion. "I don't know and I don't know. I'm shocked, Grace, just as shocked as you are." The raw honesty hung in the air, a testament to my complete bewilderment. This is the kind of quiet confusion that builds slowly into something much bigger. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. A moment of silence stretched between us, filled only by Gus's heavy breathing. Grace chewed on her lip, her brow furrowed in thought. Then her eyes brightened slightly, a spark of resolve appearing. "We should call Martha," she declared, her voice firmer now, a new purpose shaping her words. Grace, her face still streaked with the remnants of tears, but her eyes resolute, pulled out her cell phone. Her fingers, quick and purposeful, navigated the contacts list until she found Martha's name. She hit the call button, then immediately put it on speaker, just as she had with Sharon. The familiar sound of a phone ringing filled the living room again, a sharp contrast to the quiet intimacy we had shared moments before. "Hey, sis," Martha's voice, loud and a little muffled, came through the speaker. There was background noise, a thumping bass, the chatter of many voices. "What's up? Everything okay?" "I need you to come here right now, Martha," Grace said, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "This is very important. I'm serious." The words cut through the background din, carrying an urgency that even Martha, in her apparent revelry, couldn't ignore. There was a slight pause. "Right now?" Martha asked, a hint of surprise in her tone. "I'm at Straps, Grace. You know the club? It's about 10 minutes from your place." The music in the background seemed to swell then, making her sound further away. "Yes, right now," Grace insisted, her voice unwavering. "Take an Uber. I'll pay for it. Just get here." Okay, Martha conceded, the slight hesitancy in her voice fading to a grudging acceptance. "All right, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Just tell me what's going on." "I'll tell you when you get here," Grace replied, her voice firm, and then, without another word, she disconnected the call. The silence that fell was thick, punctuated only by Gus's soft snuffling as he drifted back to sleep. Grace picked up the popcorn bowl, offering it to me. We sat there, sharing the salty kernels, sipping our wine, talking in hushed tones about Sharon. We pieced together what we knew, which wasn't much more than my initial confrontation and Sharon's lie to Grace. It was like trying to assemble a puzzle with half the pieces missing, and the ones we had didn't quite fit. The minutes crawled by, each one filled with quiet speculation and a growing sense of unease. About 20 minutes later, a car pulled up outside. Gus, ever alert, lifted his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Grace was already up, heading to the door. Before she could open it, Martha was already there, pushing it open, a swirl of cool evening air following her in. Martha was taller than Grace, with Sharon's dark hair and sharp features, but a little more angular, less soft. She wore a fitted black top and jeans, a scent of perfume and something else, alcohol perhaps, clinging to her. She immediately bent down, performing Gus's ritual, which involved a thorough head scratch and a dramatic embrace of his massive neck, much to Gus's apparent delight. He wriggled, wagging his tail with a thump, forgetting his earlier grumble. After her dog greeting, Martha straightened up, pulling Grace into a tight hug. She then hugged me, a quick, firm squeeze. Her presence, a darker, more boisterous energy than Grace's, filled the room. Martha sat down next to Grace on the couch, their shoulders almost touching, a silent affirmation of their sisterly bond. "Okay," Martha said, her voice still carrying a hint of the club's energy. "What's the emergency? You guys scared me. I was at a party." She looked from Grace to me, her dark eyes searching for answers. Grace stared at her, her expression one of disbelief. "Are you high, Martha?" she asked, her voice flat, cutting through the lingering cheerfulness Martha exuded. Martha blinked, then laughed, a short, sharp sound. She shrugged. "No," she said too quickly. Then with a casual wave of her hand, she admitted, "All right, maybe 2 margaritas and 1 cocktail, but I'm fine. What's going on?" Grace just shook her head, a sigh escaping her. She looked at me, a silent command in her eyes. "Go make some coffee, Dad," she instructed, her voice steady and practical once more. The stage was set. The two sisters and I were ready for a full family confrontation.